Hey everybody, Dr. Joe's in the house. Hopefully you can hear me today. I apologize for those ones who listened last week, but my audio was off. So technical issues, but hopefully you can hear me today. I hope you're doing well. Just give me a little shout out if you can hear me okay on your audiences. And let me just patch in the Instagram folks. And let's have a look. Hmm, Well, looks like Instagram's not going to be on today. Anyway, hope you're doing well on this Wednesday evening, wherever you are. And today we're going to talk about rent and rental systems to get paid, so that way you can get money for your rents and so on. But before I get too far, to avoid the problems I had last week, just audio is good. Okay, audio is good. Okay, so we're good. So it's all about the money today. Collect more rent and chase less. Proven rent collection systems and so on. So as you all probably know, the rents are the lifeblood of our business, and I know that for me, it's almost like the 20 or the 80/20 rule, where most of my tenants pay on time, no problems, but I still got a couple of stragglers, I call them that way, where it's almost like you got to pull pull blood out of a stone. Every month you got to go after them to get the rent. I mean, they'll pay eventually, but you have to chase them and so on. Thank God I don't have to chase Section 8, because that money comes in automatically. So the bulk of my money is really through the Section 8 system, which works pretty good. It's just that there's a small portion that the tenants pay and so on. So that I have Section 8 tenants. So that's the system that we have. If you have market tenants or you rent to market renters, then they're responsible for the entire amount. So you have to have systems in place there. Otherwise, you may not get your rent. You're going to have a lot of money that's out there, and it can be very, very frustrating. So I thought I'd have a session today focused about, the trials and tribulations of collecting rent. And so the idea is that we collect more rent, we chase less, and I'm going to talk about the proven rent collection systems that work. I use these systems. It's not always perfect. As I was going through my preparation for today, I thought, wow, that's a good idea. And so there's certain things I'm going to incorporate into my business, and just based on the research that I've done in preparation for today. That's one thing I like about the Wealth Wednesdays is that I learn a lot, because I'm always into continuous learning. And as I prepare for these sessions, and I'm also learning as well, up in my game. And so it works both ways. Hopefully, I'm sharing quality information with you, and hopefully, it's going to help you. But also, I gain as well, because in preparation for these live streams, I do quite a bit of research, and I try to incorporate these things into my day-to-day activities. Okay, so let's get down to it. How many profitable rental portfolios have quietly underperformed, not because you own or we own the wrong properties, but because we never really mastered the art and the science of collecting rent consistently. I mean, it's an art, it's a science, collecting rent. People just don't pay. Well, most people do pay, but some people just won't pay unless unless you have checks and balances in place, you have carrots and sticks in place. So every month, thousands of landlords spend valuable time sending reminders, text messages, making uncomfortable phone calls, negotiating payment arrangements, and worrying about whether they'll get the rent, before the mortgage is due. And the irony is that many of these investors, you and I, spent countless hours researching neighborhoods, analyzing deals, negotiating purchases, renovating the houses, but devote very little time and attention to creating a professional rent collection system, a professional rent collection system. And what I found is that successful investors understand that purchasing the property it's really only the beginning. You have to consistently convert that rental income into predictable cash flow. And that really is what determines whether you're going to have long-term wealth. That's what's going to determine whether you're going to be surviving in this business. And the asset that you purchase is going to be a source of wealth, or it's going to be a source of stress. So one of the biggest differences between the average landlords, and really successful ones, ultimately determines whether an investment becomes a long-term wealth building vehicle. Oops. Sorry about that. Wealth building vehicles, or whether it's going to be something that's going to not turn the way it's supposed to be. So we recognize that generally you have to set clear expectations with your tenants. You got to have consistency and convenience, and you got to be professional. Rather than reacting to problems after they occur, experienced landlords like you and I hopefully proactively design processes that make paying rent straightforward while making late payments the exception rather than the rule. So today, I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to break the session into 4 parts. And, normally I break it into 5 or 6 parts. Today, I'm going to have 4 parts. Each one's a little longer. But the bottom line is that we're going to talk about how do you put together an effective rent payment system that works, that hopefully will help you realize the goals that you have for your rental portfolio, and you have less stress and frustration in collecting your rent. As I said before, one of the beauties of the Section 8 program is that for the most part, the rent is automatic, and the Section 8 program pays most of the rent. So most of the rent hits your account automatically, come what may, as long as the tenant's in the house. It's just that there's another portion which the tenant pays, which you have to collect. So let's get down to the 4 sections. The first one is really building the foundation before the first rent payment. How do you establish the foundation with your tenants and before they move in? Okay. And the question is, why do some landlords rarely chase rents while others seem to battle late payments every single month? Constant battle. Why is that some people have it together and some people it's a constant hassle to get their money? Well, the answer usually has very little to do with the tenant's income and far more to do with the systems established before the tenant ever receives the keys. What I found is that experienced landlords or experienced investors understand that rent collection begins long, long, long before the first payment is due. It begins during the screening, the marketing phase, the tenant screening phase, the lease negotiation phase, the move-in orientation phase. It all, the tenant hasn't paid any rent yet, but you've set expectations about how you do business and what are the do's and don'ts, what you accept, what you don't accept, what are the systems, and so on. Every interaction communicates expectations and establishes a professional relationship that will influence the remainder of the tenancy. Investors who consistently collect rent on time rarely rely on luck. It's not about luck. It's about creating the environment where paying rent becomes normal and expected part of the tenant experience. It's expected that the tenant pays their rent. Successful investors have learned that clear expectations eliminate many future problems. They thoroughly explain the due dates, acceptable payment methods, the grace periods, the late fees, communications procedures, and the consequences of non-payment before a lease is signed. So we do all that as part of the prep phase. We explain to the tenant. There's no room for misunderstanding. When are the renters due? How do you pay your rent? How long is the grace period? Is it 1 day, 2 days, 5 days, 10 days? What is it? What are the late fees that's going to be incurred if you pay outside of the grace period? And the communications procedure. How do we communicate, whether it by email, whether it by text messages, whether it by phone calls, and the consequences of non-payment? So we explain all these things as part of the process. Nothing is left open to interpretation. So the idea is that tenants understand not only what is expected, but also why consistency benefits everyone involved. So this level of transparency, which you set up from the get-go, is reduces misunderstanding and demonstrates that the property is being managed professionally by someone that means business, hopefully you. Okay, it's not a casual relationship, it's a business arrangement. Okay, so by contrast, the inexperienced or the unsuccessful landlords unintentionally create future collection problems. Okay, by trying too hard to be accommodating. They tell themselves, well, things are going to work out okay, don't worry about it. Or assume that tenants already understand standard rental procedures. Sometimes they don't. When the first late payment occurs, they try to negotiate, exceptions without documentation. They waive late fees inconsistently or accept partial payments, okay, without a clear repayment plan. And that's in which I didn't used to enforce, which is the late payments, late fees. I used to waive them based on gut feelings and so on. Now I just charge it. If it's after, unless they provide me with a good excuse or good reason, there's a late fee if the rent is not paid. If the rent is paid after the 5th of the month, midnight the 5th is usually my deadline. So, these well-intentioned decisions often send unintended signals to the tenants that you're flexible and deadlines are negotiable. Over time, these exceptions become expectations, making future enforcement increasingly difficult. Yeah, this is really, really bad when you're in an apartment building where there's inconsistency. You have to make it consistent across the board because the word gets out. Hey, I pay my rent late. The landlord didn't charge me anything, and people keep on pushing the envelope, pushing the envelope, and next thing you know, you got chaos in your hand. So the most successful investors understand that professionalism actually strengthens landlord-tenant relationships. Yeah, tenants appreciate consistency because it creates fairness and predictability. Everyone is treated equally. Expectations remain clear, and decisions are based on established policies rather than emotions. Okay, so investors who master this principle, in my opinion, spend significantly less time resolving avoidable disputes because both parties understand the rules from the very, very beginning. So set the foundation is part one. Now, part two of today's discussion is designing now. Well, now we've set the expectation. The next thing is design the rent collection systems that practically run themselves. Okay, we've set the expectation, we've developed the foundation. Now we're going to start putting the systems together. So the question is, are you collecting rent or are you spending every month chasing it because your systems are doing too little of the work? Okay. Are you collecting rent or are you spending time every month chasing it because you don't have the systems and in place? So, okay. So let me talk about that one then. One of the greatest lessons I've learned is that it's important to establish efficient rent collection system, and that doesn't require constant supervision. Okay, and many new landlords unknowingly make themselves responsible for every payment by manually sending reminders, accepting multiple payment methods, tracking balances on spreadsheet, and following up individually with tenants every month. While this approach may be okay if you've got a small portfolio, one or two properties, but once you start building a larger portfolio, it can get very, very overwhelming. So what we found is that you have to simplify the payment process and making it easy for the tenants to pay on time while making exceptions increasingly rare. Now, for me, it just so happens that most of my tenants pay by Cash App, and they have Cash App on their phones. They have Cash App accounts, and they pay with me through Cash App. Some pay through Zelle, and very few actually pay through ACH. But I know that there are, 'cause I don't know if all my tenants have bank accounts, to tell you the truth. So, there are online payment portals which automate, with automated ACH withdrawals, recurring electronic payments, and property management software that's out there that can do a lot of this stuff. Okay. And these things really have transformed the way landlords can collect rent. Instead of relying on memory or manual intervention, these systems automatically notify tenants of upcoming dates, process payments electronically, document transactions, and also generate payment histories. Automation doesn't really eliminate every transaction problem, but it can dramatically reduce the number of preventable issues caused by forgetfulness, misplaced checks, delayed mail, and inconsistent communications. As I said before, where I am, it just a client base that I tend to work with, they all have, well, most of them have, Cash App and Venmo and Zelle, mostly Cash App and Zelle. That's how I get most of my rents from the tenants. Obviously, through the Section 8, I get it electronically through ACH. But the idea is that you establish, based on your client base, your customers, you set up something that's convenient for them, and a method where they can securely pay by phone, the computer, or through their bank account in just a couple of minutes, a few minutes. If you can do that, then really excuses, due to, well, I don't know, checks in the mail or whatever it is, they largely disappear. If they have the money, there's no excuse for not paying. Many experienced investors have found that, offering just a single preferred electronic payment sometimes works, but I like to have multiple ways just in case people prefer a different way. Okay. So, but standardization, whatever it is, does create efficiency, minimizes bookkeeping errors, and provides both landlord and tenants with a permanent payment record should questions ever arise. There's always a paper trail when everything is done electronically. I know that I send statements to my tenants a couple of times a month. Once I send reminders before the 5th. We send statements around the 10th. And for those people who haven't paid, we send another statement after the 20th of each month. Let them know that the rent is still due, and these are the charges that have been added due to late fees, and these are what the balances are. So that's number 2. Setting the foundation and also putting the systems in place. Number 3, which is what I'm going to talk about next, is communications. Communications that prevent problems before they become delinquencies. Communications that prevents problems before they become delinquencies. The question is, could better communications prevent many late rent payments before they ever happen? Could you improve your communication with your tenants so you avoid a lot of these problems that other landlords have? And you can circumvent some of the issues that other people have. So many landlords assume that rent collection problems begins when the due date passes. In reality, experienced investors know that collection problems often begins weeks earlier through poor communications, unclear expectations, or inconsistent follow-up. One of the most overlooked skills in successful property management, in my opinion anyway, is proactive communications. Investors who communicate clearly, professionally, and consistently create an environment where tenants understand expectations long before payment issues arise. I mean, I mentioned that earlier on. They don't wait for problems. We try to work to prevent them. Okay, professional landlords recognize that every interaction with a tenant reinforces both accountability and or sometimes generates uncertainty. They communicate rent due dates early, payment procedures, how you're going to pay, maintenance policies, lease requirements, and consequences of late payments in a respectful but consistent manner. So the idea is that when issues arise, we address them promptly rather than allowing misunderstanding to linger and linger and linger. This approach builds trust because tenants know what to expect and believe they will be treated fairly. Okay, investors who maintain open professional communications often discover that many payment concerns can be resolved relatively quickly before they escalate into serious delinquencies. And one thing I found is that successful investors also understand the importance of separating empathy from inconsistency. Yes, life happens. I get it. Tenants lose their jobs, they experience, sometimes they experience medical emergencies, encounter unexpected financial setbacks. So it's really important to have compassion. So compassion is appropriate. I'm not saying you should be hardball all the time. It just depends on the situation, depends on the tenant. But successful in landlords avoid making emotional decisions that undermine long-term business practices. Instead they rely, what we try to do is to rely on documented payment agreements, if possible, a written communication, and clearly defined policies. When a tenant of mine is late, I try to establish a payment plan if they are experiencing hardship, so it doesn't get kind of out of hand. I also look into different organizations in the community that can also assist with rent. I have an assistant who sometimes contacts these organizations and to find out what's available and how to apply. So again, I'm helping my tenants, because in helping my tenants, I'm really helping myself, because if they're running into difficulty or hardship, then there may be some organizations or other sources of rental assistance, short-term rental assistance, that they can tap into. So yeah, that's what I do anyway. So, but the unsuccessful ones make the opposite mistake. They avoid the difficult conversations. They ignore the early warning signs or allow frustration to dictate their communications style. Others become overly informal, relying on verbal communications that are easily forgotten and misunderstood. So over time, inconsistent communications sort of erodes trust, increase disputes, and creates confusion regarding expectations. Again, investors who eventually improve their rent collection rates, we often discover that changing how we communicate is just as important as changing how we collect our rent. Okay, so that's number 3 done. So again, I got about 5 more minutes left. If you have got any questions, please put them in the chat box, and I'll get to you in a few minutes. Anything to do real estate, any issues, problems, concerns that you're having, challenges you're having, please drop them there, and I will try to get to you in about 5 minutes. If you're more a situation where you need one-on-one discussions, then feel free to book a one-on-one with me. Go to my website, www.joeasimo.com, www.joeasimo.com, and you can schedule a one-on-one with me. Okay, so that's so let's move on to number 4, which is enforcing policies without damaging relationships. How do you enforce policies without damaging relationships? Okay, so the question is, can you both be compassionate and consistent, or does being too nice actually create bigger problems for everyone? Okay, can you be too nice and people take advantage of you? Well, one of the most difficult lessons many residential real estate investors learn is that enforcing lease policies consistently is not only good business, it's also one of the fairest things to do for everyone. Okay, many new landlords fear that enforcing late fees, payment deadlines, or lease provisions, will damage the landlord-tenant relationships. As a result, they delay the difficult conversations. They will look repeated late payments and will continually grant exceptions. I was like that until I realized sometimes you just have to do what you got to do. And tenants are good tenants for the most part, and so they will hopefully pay. And if they don't, then you have to, as I said, you got to do what you got to do. And most tier 1 tenants there are eternally grateful to live in your home in your area. So I don't have the same issues, at least a number of issues that other landlords have, because I take the time to screen my tenants. And and by thorough screening, getting the diamonds, you tend to avoid a lot of the problems that other people have. So ironically, sort of the well-intentioned decisions often create greater frustrations for both parties. Tenants become uncertain about expectations. Good tenant notice inconsistent treatment, between the ones that pay on time, the ones that don't. And landlords themselves find negotiating the same issues month after month after month. So, what does that mean? It means that successful investors understand that consistency is not about. It's not really just about being harsh. It is about creating predictability and also fairness. So, experienced landlords know that every exception every exception establishes a precedent. If one tenant is allowed to pay late repeatedly without consequences, other tenants may begin to expect similar treatment. This is especially in apartment communities. So while flexibility may occasionally be appropriate, for truly extraordinary circumstances, successful investors make those decisions very carefully. We document every agreement, establish firm repayment schedules, and avoid allowing temporary accommodations to become permanent expectations. So compassion should be intentional. There's nothing wrong being compassionate and controlled, but not emotional and inconsistent. Another important lesson learned by experienced investors is that timely action almost always produces better outcomes than delayed action. Sometimes you have to act fast. When rent is late, successful landlords follow a predetermined process. Communicate properly, document all interactions, issue required notices where appropriate, and follow procedures outlined in the lease agreement and applicable state laws. Okay. The goal is not confrontation, it's resolution. By addressing problems early, many payment issues are resolved before they escalate into lengthy disputes or even legal proceedings. Investors who consistently follow established procedures, in my opinion, they tend to resolve problems before they get to really lengthy disputes and so on. So unfortunately, investors who try to avoid enforcement frequently experience things like small problems become large problems. One missed payment becomes several. Partial payments become the norm. Communications deteriorates and frustration builds. So yeah, so the lesson is clear. Professional enforcement protects both the business and also the relationship. Okay, that's about it. So let me just wrap things up in conclusion. Again, if you got some questions, please put them in the chat box and I'll get to you in a second. Successful residential real estate investing is about far more than acquiring properties. It's about consistently converting those properties into reliable, predictable cash flow. That's the end of the day, what we're trying to do. So while investors often devote an enormous amount of time to finding deals, establishing the financing, negotiating purchasing, many people underestimate the importance of creating professional rent collection systems. But at the end of the day, we want predictable income because that funds our mortgages, our maintenance, our capital improvements, emergency reserves, and future you got to have a predictable cash flow or money's coming in. Without reliable collections, even excellent investments can struggle to reach their full potential. So throughout this live stream, what I try to do is explore different lessons learned by different landlords, and both successful and unsuccessful in managing rent collections. Okay, the most successful landlords, which I've talked about, share several common characteristics. Okay, there are several common characteristics of successful landlords as it pertains to collecting rent. What are those characteristics? They establish clear expectations before moving. They implement standardized policies. They leverage automation wherever possible. They communicate professionally. They document every important interaction. They enforce lease provisions consistently and continuously refine their systems as their portfolio grows. We understand that effective rent collection is not about chasing tenants. It's about building an environment where paying tenant or paying rent on time becomes the normal expectations rather than the exception. We also examine the costly mistakes in this live stream that have challenged many, inexperienced, and what non-payment does. Delayed what they do? They delay difficult conversations, making repeated undocumented exceptions, relying on manual processes, neglecting communication, and postponing system improvements. So these things are really the gist of what I've talked about today. Every investor, whether owning a single rental property or an extensive portfolio, can adopt proven strategies that can improve your cash flow, reduce delinquencies, and create a more professional and scalable rental business. Ultimately, mastering rent collection is one of the highest return on investments that you can have. Strong systems create strong portfolios. That's the bottom line. They provide financial stability during changing market conditions, improve tenant relationships, and reduce administrative burdens, and free you, the investor, to focus on more strategic things of growth and rather than dealing with problems all the time. So the goal is simply to collect more rent. That's it. That's the goal. It is to, it's not simply just to collect more rent. It's to really to create a business that consistently generates predictable income while allowing you to build long-term wealth with greater confidence and less stress. So that, my friends, is today's Wealth Wednesday. And that's to make up for what I missed last week. Again, if you got some questions, please put them in the chat box. I'm going to wrap it up in a couple of minutes. If you want to shoot me an email, by all means, shoot me an email. You can shoot me an email at joe@joeasamoah.com, joe@joeasamoah.com. If you want to book a one-on-one with me, you can always go to my website, www.joeasamoah.com, www.joeasamoah.com, and you can schedule a one-on-one there. So let's have a look what we got here. In terms of audio is good, so I'm glad that you heard me. And janitor on fire. I know there's a hi janitor on fire. I'm not sure who you are. Edie Brooks. Let's have a look. What's up, Dr. Joe? Well, what's up with things are cool. Let's have what's up with me. Well, I think I'm going on vacation in a couple of weeks. We're going to Honduras. I'll get to Belize. Yeah, Belize and Honduras, I think it is in Central America. A couple of weeks. So that should be a nice little break. And tenants are doing fine. I'm putting new systems on AI. Getting really, really into AI now, using AI strategically to improve my business operations, day-to-day operations. I love AI. I think it's wonderful, and if you use it right, and now I can do things that I wasn't able to do before. Gauge the wellness of the business, gauge the it's just so much you can do with AI that it's amazing, and I'm really getting more into it. So yeah, that's what's up with me. Things are going pretty good, and for the most part, all my tenants are paying their rent on time, and for the most part, all my Section 8 payments are coming on time. Okay, you said you don't know if your tenants have bank accounts. This is one way to verify income and other things. You do not use the statements. Well, yeah, well, renting to Section 8, a screening for Section 8 is very different than market renters. Market renters, obviously, you expect that they have a bank account. You can check their bank records if you want to as part of the screening process. If for Section 8, what I found, what's really important and I'm doing that right now, one of my properties, is as part of the screening process, is landlord's references, current and previous landlords, making sure you speak to the right person, make sure you can ask a lot of pointed questions. So landlords, income and credit is really not that important as much with Section 8 tenants as they are with market renters. I'll explain that in a second, because most of the rent is paid for by the housing authority. And more importantly, you as a landlord don't determine what they pay. That's the job of the housing authority. They tell you based on the number of people in the household, based on the income that's coming into the household, this is their tenant's portion. And that tenant's portion could be as little as zero all the way to $1,000 or even $2,000. It just depends. I don't control that. And so on. So, yeah, so I really, so some of my tenants don't have, if their rent is low or zero, they may not even have a bank account. I mean, money's coming in. It may go through to their debit card or go through to, but somehow it gets to the Cash App. I'm not too sure exactly how, or, but that's how they pay me if they have a portion. The vast majority of my tenants pay by Zelle and Cash App. So I don't verify income for the most part because it doesn't matter. I don't determine what they pay. It's done by the housing authority. Yeah, so that's I know it's kind of weird, especially if you're in the and also credit is not that important as well. When you're dealing with Section 8, if you're dealing with market renters, credit is absolutely critical. But for the Section 8 community, I haven't found too many tenants who have good credit. And that really doesn't worry me too much because the bulk of the rent is paid for by the housing authority through HUD, and the federal government has AAA credit. So my money through the housing authority is pretty much guaranteed, and that tends to be the largest portion. So yeah, I know it's kind of weird for those people who are not used to the Section 8 space, but it's a different way of screening. And I also do the home visits, as you know. So I like to go to people's home and see how they keep the home. And because I found that how they keep their house today is how my house will be in 3 months. And most tier one tenants don't have a problem with you going to the home. People who object, um, to me, it's a red flag. So if they, it's part of the policy. I'm going to do a home visit. If you don't want me to come, then I'm sorry, I just can't rent to you. So yeah, that's how that works. Let's have a look. I got another question from Cheryl Wine. Weir Notary. Lots of love. I agree, Dr. Joe. They need to be able to keep the house. How do they with no income? How do you verify this? How do I know that they're going to keep the house? I mean, what I found, I know it's difficult for people. What you earn has got nothing to do with how you keep your house. Just because they don't earn that much income doesn't necessarily mean that they have a dirty house. I haven't seen a correlation between the two. I know the stereotype is that, but for the tier one tenants, I don't see the correlation. Many of my tenants who have very small rent portions keep their homes spotless. They keep their house very clean, and they take care of their utilities, the bills. They take care of the rent, and I don't have those problems with tier one tenants. Now, if I rent to tier two, tier three, tier Z, then yeah, you could have all those issues, and but I purposely only rent to tier one. So I like to keep up, I like to do the home visit because the home visit is what determines how my house is going to be. If they take care of their current home, they're probably going to take care of mine. If they destroy and trash their current home, they're probably going to destroy and trash my house. So the home visits is absolutely critical, and it lets me know how my house is going to be. And but they usually have some income of some sort coming in, whether it be Social Security, whether it be TANF, or whether it be child support or whatever it is. I mean, there's money coming in because they have to pay utilities, they have to eat, they have to feed the children, and so on. So there's some money coming in, but that's all factored in by the housing authority when they determine what their rent portion is. So yeah, I mean that's how I do my high level screening, and for the most part, it works for me. And it's different, but it works. And the backbone is that the bulk of the money is coming from the housing authority every month, come what may, guaranteed. Doesn't matter. I think they paid the August payment on Monday, and yeah, it all came in. So, my friends, I'm going to wrap it up for today. It's now 7:44. So hopefully today was helpful. And I will see you next Wednesday for another Wealth Wednesday. I'm not sure what the topic's going to be, but I'm sure it's going to be an interesting one. And so have yourself a wonderful rest of the week. And I'll see you next week. If you've got any questions, please put them in the chat box. Or if you want to shoot me an email, shoot me an email at my email address, joe@joeasimo.com, joe@joeasimo.com. What program do you use for the application, online or paper? I have all my typically I have a paper application. So what will happen is that people will come to the house for an open house. They'll see the house, physically, and if they like the home, then I give them an application form. There's a $25 application that I charge for each adult. They fill that out. Usually, while they're at the property, I then go through the application once it's completed. I verify, who they are, looking for ID. If there's certain parts of the application which are missing or is not there, I tend to query them, and I have a conversation with the tenants. I try to get to know them. There's so much you can gather when you are in person, physically, as opposed to everything's done electronically. In electronically, I find that you can hide stuff, or people can't always explain what's happened in landlord history, and also the income credit, and then also the home visit as well. Okay, so that's what I do. My friends, have yourself a wonderful rest of the day, and I will see you next Wednesday. Take care. Bye for now.